Hey everyone, good afternoon or early evening. Welcome. So nice to see you.
Aparna.
Hi.
Yeah.
Whenever you pop in, it would be great if you can turn your camera on or give us an emoji to say hello. It's so nice to see your faces, your photos. Hi. Whether you're driving or in an office or wherever you are, we're so glad you're joining us. Welcome to our roundtable that we're going to be having today with educators from around the Sub-Saharan Africa and MENA regions. We are super excited today to be sharing stories about how we're using systems thinking to support our work as educators. We're expecting some more people to pop in over the next few minutes. So I want to just start off by welcoming you. My name is Geetanjali. I'm the Education Program Manager at Compass Education. And I'm super excited to be today collaborating with Lawrence and Carolina, who will introduce themselves in a moment, to run what I hope will be a conversational roundtable with all of us involved. So we're going to do a little bit of intro and then invite you to dive in. So like I mentioned, as you're popping in, feel free to turn on your cameras, get somewhere comfy that you'll be able to unmute because we do want to hear from everyone today. And just a little bit of norm setting to help us get started. For our roundtable, we are really looking forward to hearing from as many of you as want to share. If you're here more to listen, that's okay. If you're here more to talk, I know several of you have come with stories and ideas to share. We are looking forward to having you collaborate today in a space that feels like it cultivates belonging and connection. We're all learners. We're going to hopefully be, really respectful and encouraging of each other in this session. We want it to feel positive. So please do unmute to share. Faces are welcome. So nice to see so many already. And feel free to do chat conversations and questions at any time. Like I said, we will unmute, but for the moment, as you're popping in, say hi in the chat. Say your name, where you're coming from, whatever you'd like, and then we will definitely ask you to unmute soon and share a bit more. But as we keep going and wait for a couple more people to pop in, just a little bit about who's hosting this. So you all are already connected to us in some way, but just to recap, we're Compass Education. We're a nonprofit who work around the world with educators and schools to cultivate a more sustainable world through systems thinking. And we really are a global community of educators who believe that to make that better, more sustainable future, we need to work with teachers and students and schools. And part of what we really are talking about today, and we want to invite you to share about, is the power of systems thinking to support that. We really believe that cultivating this mindset that the world is interconnected and dynamic and full of these relationships we can navigate to create change is essential for cultivating sustainability. And that's why we focus on sharing systems thinking tools like the ones we'll be talking about today, so that we can go from thinking about just a problem to thinking about how problems are fit in this bigger systemic context. So that's what we're looking to all of you to help us share today in our roundtable, because we know that you're part of helping us build this more sustainable world through the work you're doing in your communities, helping people develop the knowledge and skills and dispositions they need to educate and act and learn for sustainability. So our theme is going to be cultivating connection and belonging. And I'm actually going to stop screen sharing in a moment to invite my co-facilitators, Lawrence and Carolina, to introduce themselves and talk a little bit about what our theme is for today. And before I do that, just again, thanks to everyone who's popping in. Please feel free to say hi in the chat, who you are, where you're coming from, and whenever you're ready, turn on your cameras and, or give us an emoji wave to let us know you're here. In the meantime, I'm going to stop sharing and turn it over to Lawrence to introduce himself and talk a little bit about our theme.
Yeah, Tanjali, thank you so much. Hello to everyone. I am Lawrence Myers. I am currently the K-12 Service Learning Coordinator at the American School of Dubai, where I have been for the last, 9 years, I think. And my connection with Compass is that I am a Compass facilitator for I guess, both of the online courses from time to time, and also have served as a certification reviewer, and am currently the leader of the MENA kind of Compass Education Group. I wanted to just maybe start by talking about belonging and connection, really, because I think what happened in our circumstance, and of course everyone has their own, and I believe we all have a voice here, so make sure that during the course of today's session that everyone has a chance to speak and talk about their experiences. But my specific experience that I wanted to focus on was coming out of COVID. And of course, Dubai actually dealt with COVID very well and got out of the isolation piece relatively quickly. But what we found was because there were students and of course all of us online for so long that people were longing to create a new opportunity for connection. And there was one specific design and innovation class that I'm thinking about that had a design challenge, I guess, related to creating connection. And what was it that was lacking in terms of connection? What was getting in the way of connection? So they brought me in to run a couple systems thinking activities as we were doing the ideation process. And what really surprised me, and the guiding question was, what are the challenges of being connected and feeling like we're members of a community? And the one thing that kind of jumped out at me was the fact that several of the kids, so there were two different classes, several of the kids actually brought up the fact that the competitive nature of the school was a detriment to building community. And they actually looked at each other as competitors and not necessarily members of a community. And that got us into some pretty interesting conversations about what it means to be in a community, how many voices exist in a community, and under what ways can we actually generate that sense of togetherness, even though we all come from different countries. We have over 70 countries represented at our school, so quite a diverse population ethnically and certainly in very many other ways as well. So the process was really about, okay, recognizing these dynamics and the things socially, economically that disconnect us. How is it that we can build something tangible to bring us together? So that was my first attempt at kind of working with that. I also recognize these days that there's a big shift internationally in terms of the DEIJ work. Diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. And there's a lot of connections that I've made in that space, also through systems thinking. There's one tool in particular that Compass uses that is called the ladder of inference. And I've had several kind of deep conversations with high school students related to the ladder of inference and how it is that it establishes kind of behaviors and assumptions and how people think versus how they behave, and how that either gets in the way or supports, the idea of diversity and the idea of inclusion for people who are different from each other. And so there are a lot of dynamics, in my opinion, in terms of how systems thinking can be used to celebrate diversity, but to also bring people together and to open that space for a variety and multitude of voices. So I'm very excited to be here. I'm very excited to have this specific conversation. When Carolina brought it up a few weeks ago when we were ideating this, I was like, yes, that is awesome. So I'm very excited to be here, and I'm very thankful that so many of you are here to join us as well. So Carolina, would you like to speak as well and add your voice to this?
Thank you, Lawrence, and thank you all for joining us. It's really, really exciting to have the possibility to meet so many of you. I'm Carolina Charsley, or Datha Charsley, as I am from Chile, but I have spent half of my life in Zimbabwe, in Africa. So it has a special place in my heart, this country. I'm the CAS coordinator at Harare International School in Zimbabwe. I also coordinate a personal project. I seem to be gravitating towards programs that are trying to encourage connection and philosophy of belonging. And well, I'm also the regional leader for Sub-Saharan on behalf of campus education. And what attracted me to this topic, as Lawrence was saying when I mentioned it some time ago, is I have noticed, over the years in Zimbabwe, we have experienced many ups and downs. But at the same time, with the downs, it comes the time when feeling challenging and feeling the need to feel like we belong somewhere. I'm not just speaking as perhaps as a foreigner in this country, which is beautiful, but also as in Zimbabwe, you know, feeling part that they belong to Africa and they belong to the world and they have so much to offer. And so in between all those, you know, thoughts about belonging, the need for connection is so important as part of a country that has still so much to offer. But for some reasons, for safety or, you know, the desire to be accepted globally or regionally, it has been at times a little bit of a challenge. So I'm really excited to be part of this meeting where we will be discussing how we can cultivate, you know, connection and belonging. And we will explore, you know, a little bit later, the wonderful campus, you know, system thinking tools that campus has developed to actually allow us to transfer all of these, you know, analysis into the classroom. So the students actually feel that they belong, even if they are or they are not from Zimbabwe. There is always that feeling here that we need to be accepted and we need to feel like we belong, and we also have so much to offer in the region and globally. Thank you.
Thank you, Lawrence and Carolina, for grounding us in that. And I want to just echo what Carolina just said about how we all have so much to offer. And we're all coming from different contexts. Some of us are in our home country where we grew up and we have this really, you know, rich weaving of community around us that we're trying to support and cultivate belonging and connection. Some of us are visitors. Some of us are living in new places. We all want to belong. And I'm really hoping in this conversation today, we can think about what Carolina said. How do we help students and our colleagues and our communities through education, through systems thinking, feel a sense of connection and belonging? How do we support that in a way that includes and celebrates different perspectives and also encourages, you know, norms that promote that type of ethos and feeling? So we're going to break this roundtable into two pieces to get thinking about this. I'd love to start with some sharing from other people in the group about what have you tried before that you think helped with cultivating a sense of connection or belonging in some way in the community where you work. And after we hear from some members of the group, we have some reflection questions and we'll have more of like an open dialogue about what we can do to promote this more, some of the challenges maybe you faced before that you want to talk through, and we'll have a couple other reflection prompts for you. So just to clarify, our starting question for sharing stories is going to really be on how you, different people in this group, have used systems thinking, maybe the compass tools, to cultivate connection and belonging in your work. And I am super excited that it's not just going to be Lawrence, Carolina, or I sharing our stories. We really want to hear from some of you. Everybody is welcome to share. I did have the opportunity to touch base with a few of you before today about sharing. So please, I guess let's just open up the floor. Is there someone who'd like to start by, you know, practicing some vulnerability and sharing with us their first thoughts on how they've tried doing this before? Hi, Leanne. Do you want to introduce yourself and then tell us a bit about your experience? And
Sure.
oh, sorry, quick note. If you would like to share slides or images to support what you're doing, you're welcome to, but there's no need. Just talking is wonderful as well. So sorry, Leanne. Thank you.
No problem. Yes, I actually did put all my pictures together for you guys. So hold on. Can you see? Okay. So at our school, we have been working to build our community in the middle school. And with the community, try to build beyond just the students, but to get more parental involvement and community members. So I worked with Britta McCarthy, who's our learning director, curriculum director. And so she came in and she taught what the iceberg model was using the compass tools. And then from that, we used that to look at some of the environmental issues that we saw at school and ways that we could help make the school a better place that people would actually want to be in. So we looked at things like, oh, we use too much paper, there's not really any green space, there's too much single-use plastic, things like that. And it was really interesting because I teach sixth grade. So just hearing from the sixth graders what they thought were the patterns and what they thought were the structures that were supporting those patterns at the school. Because as teachers, we often talk about from the adult lens. And so to hear it kind of from the kid lens was really interesting because some of the things that they brought up, no teacher ever would have ever thought like, oh, we have too much trash in the atrium because it's embarrassing to walk to the trash can. And we were like, what? That's an embarrassing thing. But just things like that. So just to hear from them and then to dig down deep into what those mental models were and to hear from the kids as to what they thought the teachers were believing as to why certain things were happening. And then we switched it to, okay, so let's start from there and build up to like, what would the world look like or what would our school look like if this wasn't the case? And so we started with our school and looked at that. And then we looked at articles about issues in Saudi Arabia because there's the Vision 2030. And so like Saudi's really pushing to try to like move in this really innovative like green space and kind of switch from petrol to tourism. And so we looked at some articles that were kind of highlighting some of the non-successes in the country. And so then going through this, and that's pictures of them going through these articles and working through as together in groups, what were the events and the patterns of behavior and mental models in the article that they could see, and then switching it to how would we innovate it. And so eventually the idea of like Saudi is like the leader in this and Saudi's, you know, breaking records in this and looking through. And it was really cool to see them working together and collaborating in groups. And then they were going home and they were talking about these things with their parents. And so their parents were really excited to be able to talk about real issues with them. And so then we finalized our unit with a showcase where the kids got to then imagine what would be like the future city of the world. Like, how could we make the Middle East really like a place that is sustainable and climate friendly and just like a place that you would want to be in. And we were then able to invite elementary school students and parents and community members all in so that way they could see their models that they built where they said, okay, this is the future we want. This is what it's tangibly going to look like. And it was just a really cool space for all of the different aspects of the community to come together. And this was in December, end of November, beginning of December. And then that really set the bar. So then we had the ability to then do a second showcase last month. And then we'll have a third one at the end of the year. But just the parent involvement, we had about 70% of the parents come. And so that's a huge kind of win. And I definitely think that the middle school now is moving towards that piece of when we do something cool, we invite parents to come in and see it. So it's not so much this isolation by yourself. So we've seen the science teacher start to invite people in, and then we saw the ELL teacher, they did a program, invited parents in. And so we're starting to see like this is becoming more the normed culture versus just like an isolated event.
Leanne, thank you so much for sharing and, talking about the connection to issues that students are feeling and other students, parents, so many great, interesting things that you mentioned. I want to open it up to the group. What observations or questions do you have for Leanne about that experience? Anything you'd like to ask or share?
I have a quick question. For Saudi then, where are you in Jeddah?
Yeah, I'm in Jeddah.
So at your school, parents aren't generally coming to events, or they don't, is this a new kind of thing? I'm just curious.
Yeah, so COVID, similar, I think, to most places, in the region, COVID just kind of killed the community. So after coming back after COVID, it's just been hard. Like elementary, of course, jumped back in, no problem, but the middle and high school has been really much more focused on academic kind of games, and you can't really come in and watch a kid take a test. And
Yeah.
so this idea of trying to build back up that community past the elementary school and keep people involved, and it's not just sitting in a classroom. So it's been kind of moving towards that, and I think it's mostly been a side effect of COVID.
Oh, interesting. Okay, very nice. Thank you. What school is it in Jeddah?
The American school.
Oh, okay. All right. Thanks.
Okay, Tangeli, am I allowed to offer a thought there for a second? Okay, so first of all, Leanne, thank you so much for sharing that. I think for me, thinking back on the belonging piece and the voice piece, it's hugely important, I think, in learning communities to open that voice to the students. And you mentioned that several times, right? As this whole process was expanding, students had their opinions heard, that they were given opportunities, I guess, to share. And then the authenticity, of course, of the other piece of the parents coming in, the community in general coming in. I think just purely by having that happen and allowing parents to come in and have authentic, open conversations with kids, rarely does that turn bad. I mean, a parent is generally celebrating all the work of the kids and how they've done. So I think there's maybe an unintended consequence of building a much stronger community purely by inviting people in as you're suggesting. And of course, for the kids, it ups the ante in terms of the expectations of an authentic conversation versus just an in-class presentation, let's say, or something like that. And in that kind of open forum, like an expo thing that you seem to have, it feels great because it gives kids opportunities, of course, for public speaking, building kind of skills, and also getting better at their craft of explaining, doing a pitch between the first time and the last time, right? So in so many ways, it's a win-win in parts that are non-academic, and like building that community. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you.
Andrea, see your hand is raised. Go for it.
Hi, everybody. Did I unmute myself? I did. Okay. So I'm Andrea from Lusaka. I am at the American International School here, but I'm also a founder of an NGO called To End Education for All. I teach grade 3 currently, but I am very much spearheading service learning in our school as well. And really, I'm passionate about service learning, and I'm passionate about ensuring that all children get quality education. So I'm back in Zambia after a long stint abroad in international schools in Southeast Asia and all over the world. So trying to bring, I was looking at the campus. I've kind of been playing around with campus education and the tools that you have. Thank you very much. And I'm getting more and more interested in probably enrolling for one of your courses or, whatever. Let's see. But, when you talk about the well-being, the nature, the economy, and the society, tying it in, yes, with the SDG goals, but right now we're moving away from SDG goals in a way. Quite a lot of schools are doing that, right? And looking at who we are, who am I, and who we are as a classroom community, as a school community, and where do we fit in this big picture of who we are in our local communities, right? And quite often as international schools, we shy away from building those authentic relationships with our local communities and really engaging with them in an authentic manner, going in there, listening to their stories and not making assumptions about what they need and their way of life and their beliefs and whatever, because we have no idea, right? And when you provide learners a platform where you talk about student agency and you really bring it to the forefront, giving them that voice and that choice and ownership, right? for their passion, their empathy, and their interest. You are creating great experiences for them to be able to see the local communities through a different lens. You know, sometimes we say, oh, you know, they can't go to the compounds, they can't do this and they can't do that and whatever. But that's the realities of life, right? And it's also an appreciation of where you are in place and time. That's your host country. And I really feel that there is so much more that needs to be done. When you talk about belonging in the eyes of international schools around the world, we put ourselves in this bubble and we're totally disconnected with a lot of the realities that go on around us, right? How can we burst that bubble, pop it, and make sure that everyone feels that they belong, right from the people that clean the toilets and clean our classrooms to the administrative staff, right, to the teachers, embracing that world where there is no color. I am who I am because of you, right? Bringing that Ubuntu spirit into what we do and what we believe in. So for me, you know, looking at systems thinking and how we can cultivate connections and belonging through that. I mean, there's tons of opportunities to be able to do that, but really kind of looking at it and bringing in a common moral purpose, but also a common understanding of what does that mean? What does it mean to you? What does it mean to us as a school? What does it mean to our community, right? And how can we bring that sense of belonging and build those connections within ourselves and within our communities and regions and the world? Yes, thanks for listening.
So much rich food for thought there, Andrea, that you've highlighted about, you know, those of us working in an international school context, what that means to really challenge our assumptions and really explore what it means to be in a host country. How do we build these authentic connections? But also any community we're part of, right? Like we all have assumptions we need to challenge and we need to become aware of. And how can we use tools and processes to build more authentic connections with others, to listen more? I'm really curious what other people thought or what questions came up while Andrea was speaking for anyone else on the call.
If I can, I would thank you, Andrea. So lovely to see you again. Leanne, thanks so much for sharing what you just have shared with all of us. There are a couple of things that, you know, I was so pleasantly surprised. First, that you use the iceberg. I love the iceberg because it's just a wonderful way to actually break down mental models. And I find myself also exploring how a mental model that I have had for a long time had to be broken down into pieces and rebuilt all over again. So the same way, it's very liberating in a way when you discover that your own ideas and your stereotypes have to be broken down and rebuilt, and you do it collectively with your students. So I think that is so powerful. And I could see as you were talking and explaining how your students have changed and they are already experiencing such a wonderful positive change. And if that can transpire to the families, even better, because I think the breaking down of the mental models and the stereotypes is just so important in order to actually understand what is the value of where we are or how the students perceive certain things that we may perceive in a different way. So that I found it so powerful. So thank you for sharing that. The other thing that I see so strongly, and maybe it's because I'm always trying to resonate with the idea of caste and service, you know, is the opportunity that you have also with your experience of teaching, you know, in a particular way with the iceberg, is enhancing the service program. I don't know to what extent your service program is working or how it is embedded in the curriculum. But even I was thinking about the advisory program, how powerful that could be, that the students can actually reach out off campus, but can also reach within campus, and they can exchange their own ideas, drawing from what you have taught. I wanted to pass on a comment about what Andrea was saying that I find is just so powerful. We all have all our students, no matter where they come from, and you mentioned color and ethnicity and background. No matter where you are, you have so much to offer, and I think that is what I try to keep in my mind when I talk to other professionals about service. It's like the service, in a way, I struggle with the word service because it implies like somebody's going to receive, I'm just going to give. And that is not what I want. I want to think about reciprocity. I want to think about the fact that when we go out or we try to learn more about the local culture, and we get out of our bubble, as you said very well, Andrea, we got to pop that bubble, and we got to actually allow students to see the reality. That is so important to go with open eyes and ears, believing that we can learn from others, from our host country, from traditions and cultures and customs that are implemented in that, and we can all collectively feel that we eventually belong, because we all belong to one world. So thank you both. It was really inspiring to hear you both.
Yes, and I see we have another hand raised. I'd love to invite you to introduce yourself and share.
Thank you very much. I don't know if you can hear me right now. Okay. Thank you very much. I'm Katongole Alan, and I'm also a teacher, a volunteering teacher at YMCA, Kamuli branch, that is in Uganda, and also a project coordinator for one of the GSFN programs here in Uganda. So majorly, I've been talking about just from the recent conversation. I just want to add on something, balancing the cultural context. Actually, yeah, as someone, the recent speaker just talked about, involving culture into what we are doing, and so that the other students can adapt following the culture or utilizing the local traditional culture values so that we can train them. But for example, here in Uganda, I had an incident in Karamoja, one of those strict areas, where we had gone to train some young youths about vocational training. And we realized that they were giving them more of the theoretical, trying to, engage them theoretically. And it was a big challenge after the COVID. But then after a while, we realized we need to change our methodology. So we resorted to balancing the cultural context within our theory. So all we did was to integrate the local traditional ways with the modern pedologies to foster, this inclusive activeness within the students. And it was really a really positive feedback from the students. So I really agree with the recent speaker on what she had just said, that if we really integrate the local traditional values and let me say the different ways into the modern pedologies, it will help us foster a lot of, positivity, a lot of modern value into the students, let me say, and also give them that confidence in whatever they do. So also when we're doing this, when we're training these are warriors actually in the northern part of Uganda. These are warriors. So they are so much dwelt into their culture that some of them still cannot wear our recent clothings. They don't know about any clothing, so a shirt, not even a skirt. So it was a really big challenge. But then from the coordination we had on ground, when we integrated the local traditional ways and showed them that, yes, you can, without you living your traditional way, you can still have this integrated into the modern way. Now, for example, we realize that most of the students that side were into going into, after the COVID time, they went into the mining because there's a lot of gold that side. And so they went into the mining. From mining is when they come to school. So all we had to do is now engage them even from the mining sectors. How we tell them that this is gold, this is a stone, this does this. So if you get this mature, combine it with this, you get this, and this is also here theoretically. So integrating the local traditionals ways with the modern pedologies is very, 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 very valuable in fostering what we call system thinking. That is my submission. Thank you very much.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing, Katangale. Can you please say your name one more time so I can pronounce it correctly?
I'm called Katongole Alan.
Katongole. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
That's
Thank you.
such a great reflection on, this theme of mindsets, right? And so how can we use what's real for our students, for the people we're working with, to help build that shared mindset, which is all about
Exactly.
system thinking. Yeah.
Exactly.
So powerful. I wonder about others' reflections on what we just heard, and especially prompts to, how can we use system thinking tools to do that? Or what questions come up for you about that experience?
I guess I can go. Can you hear me?
Yeah, hi, Jessica.
Okay. Hello. Katongole, I just wanted to kind of add on to that idea of embracing local culture. Maybe I should give a little bit of a background of where I come from and how long I've been abroad since 2002, and I'm so thankful to be able to have. I left the United States and at that time, and I actually thought there was going to be a revolution at the time that I left the States in 2002, because I thought things were so terrible then that people were going to wake up and realize that we needed to make some changes. So I don't know if that gives you a little bit of an idea of my mindset. And that I kind of thought to myself, all right, I'm going to go back to the States when things start to get better. After the revolution, I'll go back to the States. So this is kind of where I'm coming from. I've lived abroad now for 23 years and I haven't been able to go back. And actually things are just getting worse and worse and worse, as you all know. So I have been a true believer in the SDGs for a long time. And I think that is kind of, I always believed in that, but now I feel like things are shifting in education. Who was talking about that? I'm sorry. Was it Carolina that you were saying that? Yeah, that it's actually, we're moving away from the SDGs. However, I've been in many schools now. So I've been in 9 different schools, and I've seen the power of SDGs. It gives people a common language and people can kind of springboard from that place. But you can't forget that has to be within a local context. So I'm here really just to learn. I don't know what the answers are, but I do understand that there is a collective that needs to start to happen, because I can see that collective has happened in the States, but in the way that we really don't want it to go, right? So I guess I've always kind of been a patient person, somebody who I believe everybody should be able to speak and say what is on their mind, even if I don't agree with them. So I have been, tossing this idea around a lot lately about pluralism, this idea of coexisting, even though I believe that people that support Trump, I can't understand personally why they support him, but I also feel as though they're coming from a place possibly of hurt and pain and not being seen, not being heard for a long time, and they're holding on to something that they feel as though they can move forward with, right? So I've been trying to get in this mentality of like, yes, and, you know, okay, yes, I hear you. I understand you. I don't agree with you at all. But I'm trying to understand where you're coming from and possibly why you think the way that you think. And that's why I think about when you think about local culture, I guess sometimes you don't think about, I have to embrace my American local culture when I go back home. And sometimes that's really difficult, you know, and I have to say, okay, yes, and, or whatever it may be. But yeah, so I'm just here to really learn. This is one of my first, I know I've dibbled and dabbled in Compass. I think that you guys have some really great resources for teachers, and I have looked at the iceberg, and I don't think I have gone in the depth that I probably should have with it, but I don't know how experienced everybody else is with, but I am experienced in IB. I really truly believe in it. And I am a very strong believer in languages. So I think that language is going to create the path of us being able to understand each other better. Not that you have to understand somebody else's language, but you have to give that space for other people to express themselves in their own language, and that patience to be able to listen to people in other languages so that you can try to come to a better understanding. Because if people can't speak in their own language, this monolingual mindset has really, I believe this has just gotten us into this situation where people are putting people into boxes and we're not thinking collectively. You know, we're thinking more about how can I individualistically get ahead, at least from the state's perspective. And we're not thinking collectively. And I think that's because we're not listening to each other as much as we probably should. But
Yeah, Jessica, you're bringing up so many really valuable points. And I think, you know, part of what you've highlighted is every community, like whether we're talking about a national level or a community level, we have challenges and we have different perspectives on how to go about addressing those challenges. And it can be hard to find common ground sometimes. And a big part of feeling belonging and connection is feeling like even if someone thinks differently, we are going to connect with them. So a couple of quick things before we open it up for some more perspectives, which I definitely want to hear. I just want to highlight, like, coming to this how, I want to invite us to think about that tool, the sustainability compass, right? So this is one of the tools that was mentioned about using the nature, economy, society, and well-being perspectives to make sure when we're thinking about a challenge, we are using systems thinking to think holistically about it and understand what are other people's values, what are other people's perspectives. One of my favorite activities to do is to approach a challenge, asking students to take on different perspectives of different stakeholders involved from these different compass perspectives. So they have to prepare an argument or reflect on why different people might feel the way they do and what challenges or ideas they might have to consider if they are thinking from an economic viewpoint, or really thinking about how to promote health and public health or well-being, or really thinking about, you know, cultural norms and societal needs or language, thinking about the environment. It's really important for systems thinking to systemically bring in those perspectives so we aren't just thinking from our perspective, which can be challenging our assumptions, challenging our mental models. So thank you for bringing this up. And I think all communities can relate to this challenge of having different perspectives. How do we make space to listen? How do we use structures and tools to encourage listening? And I'm curious, I know we have a couple hands raised. What else are you thinking about this? Feel free to unmute and share.
Hi, this is Ivana. Can you hear me? Thanks so much for this really, really beautiful reflections from everyone. I had so many things going on, and but I'll just highlight a few things that really popped up as something that I'd like to share my perspective, because I'm not an educator. For some of you that I've never met in the Compass sphere, I am not a trained educator. I don't teach in any school, but I worked for the UN for over 12 years, and I went through the whole process of creating SDGs within the organization, and and felt really terrible when I found out later on that the education sector was completely like sidelined and excluded in the whole process, and it's just now a little too late in the game. And now the whole world is like, oh, we need to move beyond SDGs and all of that. But I've been in the context of the mainstream curricula in the past 2 years with my books on sustainable development. And a couple of observations when you talk about when I see also educators even online talking about going sort of past SDGs and sort of leaving them behind. In my view, and I know there are quite a few deep issues with SDGs, which now the education sector having sort of chewed on it and digested on it, everyone is seeing them. What is important, I think, and what is a little bit of a risk, putting aside this framework that all the countries have committed to working on, we're missing the opportunity of students and educators being really familiar with it, being able to understand what the policymakers are doing, and being able to advocate and be activists in these spaces, with all the analytical side that comes with like criticizing the framework and all the issues with it. We are potentially going into a phase where you would again keep the education sector so disconnected from the world, no matter how screwed up it is, and not having them participate by not being educated, by not going through this analysis, like really like being familiar with it in depth so that they can actually participate in real life conversations. And that I would rather suggest to go so deep that you begin transcending it in your school setting, and you start talking of these new frameworks that eventually will then inform the public and stakeholders and people, because the education sector will come up with these new ideas and new the rigorous analysis of the framework that has so many issues, because it was created by high-level policymakers, lots of 2 years of like constant back and forth technical work with interdisciplinary work, and it's messy and it's huge and it can't be monitored. Most of the indicators we don't even have indicators in statistical offices to measure any of this, but at least it was an attempt, and there's so much that came out of it that exposed also the educational sector as the sector that's always been isolated from the real life, being locked into the curriculums that serve the old paradigm of running the world, like capitalism and everything, Jessica, that you mentioned. Even today's IB program, and I come from the IB school, it only barely scratches the surface of interdisciplinarity, although they pride themselves that they're doing it. The depth is not there, and it's still serving the cognitive, mental way of trying to solve problems in the world based on the old paradigm. So there's a fundamental issues with the systems as a result of such a big disconnect over the years. And I think abandoning SDGs and going, and again, what I also loved, and this is my second point I want to close with, Andrea and others were talking about local, really like going down to the to local communities and exploring all these big questions, particularly about identity, belongingness. Then Jessica talked about the wounds and pain that people are coming from when they come in line with the people like Trump, right? So we're talking about this somatic work, emotional intelligence, things that again mainstream schools and mainstream systems have really barely began sort of tackling in. Again, there's so much on the cognitive side. So how do we go down to the local communities and allowing these diversity and local communities worldwide now to contribute to reforming these curriculums with the worldviews and the ways the systems can be created from the local place-based learning with mixed traditions and things that now can sort of start breaking down the systems from the West that came with the imposed narrative of the ideology and the way we should be modeling and sort of modeling the children to fit into the system that is kind of crumbling, right? So I would just, leave it at that, particularly with this caution of the risk we're facing abandoning it completely. And it's also the best way, like I think SDGs are the most natural and the easiest way to begin going deep into systems thinking and use the systems thinking tools. I really think this is the framework that, unlike what you have in traditional curriculums, like having this framework is that ideal way of beginning that interdisciplinary discussions. When you stick to the framework, you're kind of forced to go there. I don't know what else can replace that at the moment. There's nothing else that can get you so deep and force teachers to find ways to kind of co-create these projects and things together to deepen the discussions and service learning and whatnot.
Ivana, so many rich ideas in that piece, sharing about not only your valuable perspective coming from the UN and looking at education and realizing this disconnect between systems, but you also highlighted a couple of things about the systems involved in creating connection to our world, connection to our local communities, and belonging. You highlighted that our schools need systems and structures to build connection, things like the SDGs. So, for all of us, what are those existing curriculum or other structures we can pull in to help create shared language and shared culture? You also mentioned, systems of connection to local community, which everyone else has brought up, right? How are we building connections with others in our community? And then it also brings up this idea of how do we have these conversations, right? We can't expect our students or our colleagues to talk about complex systems issues unless we teach them how. It's skills, social and emotional learning, systems thinking, tools and thinking. You need practice to do it. You can't just have the conversation. I want to toss it over to Zumukule. Please introduce yourself and tell us what you're thinking.
There we go. Hello, everyone. My name is Mpumelelo Zamogohle Zulu. This is my first time here. Really excited and I'm enjoying the conversation. I am a social scientist. So I've spoken at I've taught at first year undergraduate level up till the final year, and it was quite an interesting space for me. Building on all the speakers before me, I was like, yes, 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 yes. I'm agreeing with all that is being said. Something I'd like to add to the conversation is part of my experience. I've lectured, but I've spent much more time and I enjoyed more tutoring, which is a smaller setting with a classroom environment with a few more students, around 30 maximum. And for me, what I did that I found really helpful was I then created the space. I then removed myself from the space so that we can co-create it, as opposed to having me being the teacher figure, having the space be a co-learning environment for all of us. The fields I specialize in is gender sexuality from an African feminist lens. So we oftentimes engage with a whole lot of complex and oftentimes emotionally loaded topics. So when we co-create the environment, as I like what you said, that we need to learn how to speak about these things. Co-creating the environment for me helped with that, because as co-creating the environment, we get to co-create the rules of engagement also. We get to co-create what it means to be in the space for us. What does this space mean? Then from there, it allows for us to come in and create such a form of safety to some extent, for us to be able to bring in that vulnerability so that students and myself also can bring in their whole selves and share and be held, regardless of what their viewpoint or their history or their worldview is. There is a lot of disagreement because we have different ways of viewing things. Although part of the things that I really appreciated from that was how to disagree, how to make someone feel valued and heard and understood while you're also disagreeing. So I think those things were kind of parts of the things that I brought in. I've heard that there's courses under the campus education. I'd like to learn more. And also, I like that you brought in this idea of society and the nature, right? Because from my point of view, looking at, for example, gender studies, we kind of oftentimes focus from my background, we focus on the historical like big figures in the field, like you're talking about your Butler and all those other philosophers, but we often forget that people were taught gender, we were taught these concepts at home. And I like to bring it back there. So bring in, what did you learn about this? How do you conceptualize it? How do we bring you, in all of you, into the space and learn from you? So it's a cultural exchange as opposed to putting each other in competition, but we get to learn from each other's cultures, and we get to learn from also how we think about nature. The most fascinating thing I've learned so far is that for some people here in South Africa, in a specific tribe, I think they were Xhosa, if I'm not example, they think of water as a person that is, or personified as a female, because water brings life. And that's how the gender within their framework transcends human, So we bring in those concepts from all different parts. And I think that has been a fascinating thing for me. Yeah, I think that's what I'd like to contribute. I want to continue this conversation even more and learn. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing. I want to throw it back out to the group to comment and ask questions about that reflection of diving into gender and identity and cultural sharing. What does everyone else think?
Can I just jump into like one thing that's just been jumping out at me? So I don't know why I'm thinking this as everyone is speaking. And of course, everyone's got their little twist to it, which I love because contextually, all our experiences are different, of course. And the whole point of belonging is allowing that space for those kind of conversations. But for me, what I'm getting really time after time after time with everyone speaking is really to generate a sense of belonging. To build community, one needs to invite listening. And we're too busy in schools telling people what to do, providing rules, explaining the process, I don't know, whatever it might be. So for me, I would love to see schools in general be more invitational of others' opinions, very similar to what was literally just said. Let's co-create, but co-create the entire process, the entire conversation. And for me, I'd love to do a little systems map, how does this all actually connect? Because my personal experience also is defined by culture, but my personal experience is also defined by other elements, right? And other dynamics that exist in my personal context, but also the communal context. So it's a never-ending cycle, very dynamic systems situation, which could become quite complex quite quickly. But I think really it just starts with opening our ears and listening with purpose.
I love that, Lawrence. Dr. Gyoiko, I see your hand raised. What are you thinking about?
Yeah, I think the issue of a sense of belonging is both way as an invitation, but also a presentation, because it's coming from you, but you are also having a space where you have an opportunity to participate. And this stems from an aspect of interdependence. If I feel that I have a voice, I have a choice, I have a role, I have something to contribute to the bigger community, whatever culture I'm coming from, whatever baggage I'm carrying, if it is appreciated by the people who we are talking together. And I like what Lawrence talked about, listening, because listening gives that space of respect to these new ideas, but just listening and not having empathy on what the other person is having takes us deeper. Because I know we carry beliefs, we have cultural experiences, but we also have exposure. And all these things mingle out on how we treat other people, on how we manifest ourselves, on how we understand what other people are bringing on board. So the way we structure, and this gives us an opportunity as educators, because I know what, is it Leanne who talked about place-based learning, and Ivana, because the way we plan our learning experiences, it reaches to the heart of the students, and therefore they develop multiple perspectives of stuff. And this developed a pluralistic approach to many things. And the fact that they start appreciating diversity and seeing that we need to coexist for us to succeed, it opens their mind. And therefore, it's no longer, that is not mine, but I have a role to play. That one does not belong to my community, but we are all humans. So it's an issue of having a space to contribute, but also a voice to be listened to, but it is two-way, and a voice to listen to. So as educator, the choice of materials we use, the curriculum, the way we design, the learning experience we enrich, if it is designed whereby everybody has a role to contribute, everybody has a role to play, then it empowers. We can't be talking about it if we don't live it. We need to have an outlook and a disposition which outlays what we want so that everybody can pick it up and can appreciate and feel I belong. Not only by feeling, but by action.
These are such important points you're making. And I wonder, Dr. Gyoko, would you like to talk a little bit about the staff training you did as an example of how you tried to bring voices into thinking about a challenge you work on with your teachers?
Yes, thank you very much for that opportunity. We have been having curriculum reforms in the country for the last 12 years, and it has been gradual. And that means we have been boxing teachers into different categories. We started first 3 years with early years. We have been trying new curriculum called competence-based curriculum. Then we went to junior school, which is grade 7, 8, 9. So next year will be a very milestone year, which will be a breaking year, because we are having a set of teachers in senior school who have been left out for the last 12 years. But now they are going to receive students who will be now coming to them to learn this new curriculum. And therefore, I had an opportunity to work with the 52 teachers from Riara group of schools, and I wanted to expose them to this new curriculum. And I was happy to have been introduced on the iceberg model, which it helped me in terms of introducing, I wanted to know their perception. Because some of them are parents, they have children in this new curriculum, but they have been off because they're saying it is not yet with us. When will it come to us? So I did this iceberg activity, and it was very, very interesting because the first part was easy, but now going deeper to the mental model was a bit hard. But at the end of the full day, we had an opportunity to ask ourselves this question: where do we think most of our school conversations are happening? Is it at the tip or at the base? And therefore, instead of telling them, I wanted to involve them. I wanted them to participate. I wanted to see their thinking. I wanted to see their feelings so that I can see how best to sell these new ideas, because next year they'll be there. So we also had an issue of asking, what can the school leadership do to address the mental model and system rather than only visible event? Because everybody is reacting to what we are seeing, but we are not drilling deeper. And it was a very good session because they were able to come up with what you can see there as the mindset and the mental models. And this really, really told us as a team, where do we need to address so that we can change our minds on how to handle this new curriculum? What do we need to do so that we can be able to embrace these new ways of teaching? Because competence-based curriculum is more of exposing, is more of inquiry-based teaching and learning, is more of making learners partake the learning, is more of making the learner participate in the teaching and learning. And therefore, this was a very good day, and it has now come up with more sessions, which we'll be doing for the next 6 months. Every Fridays we'll be meeting so that we can continue learning with them. So what I'm saying that I've been able to find out that these tools are very good, because they allow you, the facilitator, not to tell, but to involve the participant to drill deeper, and they tell you what they are thinking. And this is very important because now you no longer just tell, but they own their teaching and learning, and therefore the transformation is inevitable. So it was a very nice opportunity to learn, and I really appreciate that tool which I use with the teachers. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for sharing. I'm wondering what questions or ideas others have in response to this.
MENA, Andrea here. Thanks for sharing that. I think I do a lot of work with local schools, right? Because trying to bring the same, like differentiated teaching and learning assessments and all that there. Student agency, our students don't have voices in our schools, right? You hear the teachers' voices and all that. So, bringing that change of way of doing and thinking and believing, because we're so stuck our minds are so stuck in a rut, I call it, in the 16th century, right? And then, I love the fact, like you said, don't go there and tell them what to do and what's wrong, right? Because this is right and da. We're sick and tired of hearing that. Go there and listen to their stories and let them tell you, So it's the questions you ask and how you ask. So as facilitators, being equipped with effective tools that will enable the participants to actively participate and reflect on their learning journey, right? On their practices, on their beliefs, and coming up with possible solutions that may or may not work, right? But you're giving them that ownership and responsibility. You're throwing the ball into their hands. And that's so different from, here's our new curriculum from the West. It really works, use it. No, it's not going to work because they're not going to buy into it. So I love that you shared that story. And yeah, kudos to you. Love to hear more about it as you go on.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Thank you very much.
I want to acknowledge that this has been such a rich, integrated conversation, and I want it to continue. So I see actually you've unmuted here. Katongole, please share.
Yeah, Jita, I wanted to ask Mayan just a simple question. From the conversation he was giving, of engaging, not just giving the theory to the student, but getting to understand their perspective. Now, in that case, I wanted to ask, if you're caught up in a scenario where you have some language issues, language barrier, I don't know. Now, for example, my example was, I want to focus on Karamoja. We had a lot of issues when it comes to language barrier. So we revised our ways because we wanted to understand their perspective, and which we did, and understand how they were doing things and how we can integrate them into the education system. And it has been a process. That's what I can say. But currently, we're trying to now bring in the LLM, the large language module, to see how the other stakeholders also understand, because their language they're still in the local way, or local language. So it is also a challenge. I just wanted to ask Mayen, how do you handle now such a scenario? Yeah, thank you very much.
I think I like what you are saying, and I've actually worked in Karamoja too. So I know the barrier of language and the barrier of culture and the barrier of perspective. The issue is understanding what they do and why they do it. Because the moment you appreciate, you put yourself in their shoes, then you will be able to understand how you can tweak and give them a different perspective. As Andrea has said, if you just come with your perspective, they'll have two perspectives. But appreciate their perspective and then see how you can seep into what they do. They have a reason. They have a reason why they stand in front of school with a big stick for small children to scare them to learn. Then once you tell them, why are you scaring them to learn? Once you understand where they're coming from, then you can say, oh, then if you want them to learn, you can also use this other method. So the moment you appreciate, they feel you're part of them, then when you give them an alternative, they will listen to you. But when you come with the alternative, because they have lived for many years with theirs, they'll just say, listen to you, then you'll go.
Thank you for that really important question, for the multicultural environments we all work in, and for that thoughtful response. I think we've covered so many interesting points, and the conversations could obviously continue, but we're nearing the end of our time. So before I toss it over to Lawrence and Carolina for some concluding thoughts, any reflections you have on this conversation, I want to take a moment to thank you all for coming to this conversation and highlight what I just put in the chat, which is if you want to have more conversations like this, I encourage you to sign up for our Compass education groups, which are free and open, and they're for anybody to join. So you can invite friends or invite others you want to have conversations with to come have more conversations about how systems thinking can support education for sustainability, for our communities, for belonging and connection. And I also put in the chat, if you're interested, some information on those, courses, and then also the free resources we have available on our website. If you want to learn more, or you're interested in diving deeper into tools you can use to have these kinds of conversations. So a huge thank you. And I want to invite a little bit of space for Lawrence or Carolina or both to just share something that stood out to you in this conversation.
Shall I go ahead? Well, as I was listening to everyone, the first word that comes to mind is the importance of interconnection, and the reality of understanding that we are not living on our own little realities, but we need for the students to understand that there is an interconnection within the classroom, and there are interconnections within the topics that we cover and we teach, and there is an interconnection on the school that we belong to, and that is also connected to off-campus, reality and the world. So for me, the word that stood throughout the entire, this entire hour of listening to all of you, it was the importance of valuing the fact that we are not an island, and we need to interconnect, and we need to remain connected. And if the students understand that, and the tools definitely allow for the students to, go more in depth into understanding the value of interconnecting, I think it empowers the students a lot more. I just find that every time I use one of the campus tools in the classroom, and I have used it with the GIS Club, and I have used them in Spanish when I'm teaching Spanish, and I have used them with the CAS students, and I have gone across to colleagues who teach language and literature, and they have used, for instance, the iceberg, discussing historical fiction books, and understanding the interconnected, realities of characters within the book, and how a plot can develop, and how the reality of, the interconnection between one behavior from one character can, produce a certain outcome in the story, and the reflective process, which is even more beautiful, of letting the students actually explore, and what do you think would have happened if, and what do you think if? And every time I walk into a classroom, I always think, what would happen if the students take ownership? What would happen if I let my control go, so they take ownership of what is happening? So for me, it's just that word, interconnection. It just was so loud in my mind during this entire hour. Thank you.
Carolina spoken like a true systems thinker right there. Yeah, it is about connection a lot. So I guess since Carolina's chosen a word, I'm going to go with a couple words too, but mine are maybe more basic. I think a lot of times teachers, educators around the world are too caught up in the what and not focusing enough on the why, and not even their why, but the why of children learning. You know, why do I have a classroom of children in front of me? And what is their why? And is the why really about teaching? It was interesting to me as you were talking about the stick and scaring children into learning. Simultaneously on the chat, I think Jessica put up an article related to SAT examinations and whether they're required. And I'm wondering, like, what is this? The paradigm that we currently have is very top down, and it doesn't focus really on the motivational pieces and the big picture of why. So I'm not necessarily a math teacher. I'm not a science teacher. I'm a teacher of children. And so the why really focuses on that child, not what I necessarily think I need to teach them, but them growing and learning and becoming adults that are capable and caring and citizens. So that's that. But then once the why is figured out, then it comes down to the how, right? So if we focus on the what and not on the why, the how is actually very different. So for me, it's important too to focus on that listening, the empathy piece, the acceptance that was earlier brought up, because I think the how is really important on developing those characteristics of a plural society, of a sense of belonging. I can't possibly feel that I belong if I never have an opportunity to voice my thoughts, my perspectives, what is important to me, and what I care about. So I think in that way, I guess coming back to the Compass tools, and it doesn't have to be Compass. I'm not selling Compass, but what I love about Compass is the fact that the tools are just so simple that they allow the how to really blossom. You know, you're just putting down a tool and letting the participants run with it, whether they're students or whether they're adults. So yes, everything's definitely connected. And we are all better people for being involved in education and doing what we do for children. And it's super beautiful for me that we have so many people here who care enough to be in this conversation and share their thoughts and opinions. So thank you to all.
And with that lovely sentiment, yeah, thank you all of you for joining us. This has been wonderful to have your voices here. And that's going to wrap up our conversation today. So we hope to see you again in the future and just have a lovely evening. And we hope you feel connected and like you have a community you belong to here and hopefully where you are physically as well. So thank you everyone for a wonderful chat.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah,
Take care.
thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.